Excellent. We're on Facebook. We're recording. Here we are. Okay, everybody, welcome to History Matters. And so does coffee. I, for some reason, was about to say, and so does chocolate. I don't know why.
That works for me.
That works for me too. But regardless, anyway, welcome. Today we're going to have a little conversation about the East Wing and the demolition of the East Wing and what that suggests. But before we plunge into that, I turn to my wonderful partner in crime, Annie, who will explain the rules of the game.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Annie Evans from New American History. Delighted, as always, to be with you on a Friday morning. If you're new, please introduce yourself in the chat. We love to greet new members to our community. I know we had a couple of new members last week. I hope they returned. Here's how this is going to work. Joanne's going to talk about today's topic for about 30 minutes. Please continue to engage in the chat. But if you have a question specific to today's topic, we would love for you to add those down below in the Q&A. I'll be back in about 30 minutes and we'll take some of your questions.
Wonderful. And yes, indeed, if you're here for the first time, say so in chat and you'll get a robust welcome because this is our 288th episode. Ta-da! So we have a community of people here who will welcome you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the demolition of the East Wing this past week. And what I want to do this morning is talk a little bit about the East Wing itself, talk about some of the renovation, not demolition, renovation and thoughts that were had about it in the past by past presidents, and then talk about what it means and why, certainly to me, it's so upsetting. And I'll circle back around this at the end. I know that I've seen people saying in one way or another, um, well, okay, it's the East Wing, but it was added later, and there are many more important things to worry about, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. Well, I think it means more than that. And yes, there are many vitally important things to worry about right now, like people being able to get food, people getting paychecks. I'm not denying any of that. What I will circle back around to at the end is what it means, because I am going to argue that part of why, certainly for me, the destruction of the East Wing, it means more than just the destruction of the building. And that's what I'll end up with at the end of my comments this morning. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the East Wing itself and a little bit about its history and a little bit about what it had, past tense, in it. So in a form, it was built in 1902 by Theodore Roosevelt. Now, I should say, back up a little bit. Thomas Jefferson actually thought there should be some kind of colonnade, which he had put in along the east side of the White House, which was there, I gather, until 1866. And then Theodore Roosevelt came along in 1902. I think he put the colonnade back in. He created something of a wing, an east wing, but the real sort of as he put it, actually, I have his words here. He wanted there to be some kind of proper shelter and facilities for people to enter. So he did something so that people who entered the White House could enter there and they wouldn't be like waiting outside to enter. He wanted to do something to facilitate people's entrance into the White House. And in the modern age, that's actually where people entered the White House. The East Wing was the visitors' entrance. In 1942, the East Wing was substantially enlarged by FDR. And in addition to what ended up in the East Wing itself, under the East Wing is, or was, or is actually probably still there, a bunker, the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, which, this is World War II time, so it made sense that there was a bunker there. It also housed staff members beginning roughly in 1977. It had a formal office that belonged to the First Lady. Eleanor Roosevelt actually established the general office of First Lady, but the formal office there opened in 1977. The East Wing had a White House Family Theater, As I said, the visitor's entrance, the colonnade. There's a picture that's been appearing online with President Obama running down the hallway with, I can't remember the name of their dog. I'm sure someone will tell me, but I can't see the chat. At any rate, that's some of what was in the East Wing. Now, what I did this morning in preparation for my comments was do a little bit of a dive into government documents to look and see how the East Wing was discussed, what it was thought of, how it was defined by the government itself. Because part of what we've seen this last week, and it's obvious, but I'll say it anyway, there is a process involved in affecting government property, historic landmarks, any number of nouns of various sorts we can put in here. There is a process, there are government agencies, there are things you need to do to clear this kind of major renovation, to have a moment actually in which the public can register what it thinks about it. There's a regulated process for this kind of, I won't even say destruction. I can't say renovation. For whatever is happening there or has happened, there's a process which clearly was ignored. And I'm going to come back to that point too. But there's a process which is part of what you're going to see in some of what I'm going to be talking about here regarding the East Wing in the past. So, for example, in 1955, 1956, there was a Commission on Presidential Office Space created. And I will even say it's Senate document, I believe, 4228, the 84th Congress, Commission on Presidential Office Space. So I'm citing sources here, August 3rd, 1956. And it talks about what could happen with office space in the East Wing, that there needs to be more space. How should it work? What would be the environmental impact? It's a lengthy, detailed report on various changes, how they might work, and the impact that they might have on the building, on what it looks like, on how it functions, on the grounds around it in many different ways. The beginning of this report says, quote, "To many, the White House is a symbol of a free and democratic nation because it is accessible and open, as is the ideal of the democratic process. Its endurance, the White House's endurance for 200 years, reflects the stability of our nation." Indeed, it does. What the White House in all of its parts represents, I will come back to. So at any rate, there's a Commission on Presidential Office Space, very lengthy, debating what should happen, what are the implications, who needs to be consulted, right? Going through the process because it's the people's house. It is not the president's house. The president doesn't own the White House. It is not the president's house. So the process is to make it an open, democratic, controlled, regulated process when the White House has changed. There have been any number of people who've been saying in any number of public venues, like, oh, big deal. There have been changes made before. Yeah, there have been many changes made before. And presidents went through the process that you have to go through to make those changes. The argument here isn't that, oh my gosh, people on the left are making a big deal because he made changes to the White House, and there have been lots of changes. What people are objecting to here, in part, is that this was done without a concern for anything other than what the president wanted. But again, I'm going to come back to that. Okay. Another report that I took a deep dive into this morning comes from the Commission of Fine Arts. Again, I'm going to cite my evidence here. It's a report of the Commission of Fine Arts, their 14th report, 78th Congress, second session, Senate document number 204, and it was dated January 1st, 1940 to June 30th, 1944. Okay, so what this document interestingly states in talking about the White House was that there was widespread discussion that after the end of World War II, the East Wing would be made into a museum regarding the presidency, some kind of a museum, a public space. There was a lot of discussion of it. I found a really wonderful quote from FDR in the process of this debate about making it into a museum, which, if you just think about the idea that they were thinking it could be a museum and now it's in rubble, that just adds further fuel to the fire of certainly outrage that I'm feeling right now. But regardless, FDR wrote a letter to the Commission of Fine Arts expressing his views on this, and he thought it was a great idea. And he said in the letter, which is in this report, if you're curious, he said every period should be represented in this museum, right? Every period of American history, all of the presidents should be represented. This was the quote that I liked. He said, for instance, the period of Chester Arthur, which in relation to furniture and other things, probably represented the highest achievement in bad art ever perpetrated on this nation. So FDR is like, even Chester Arthur has to be represented in this museum, the highest achievement in bad art. And I think he says in this letter that I saw to the chair of the Commission of Fine Arts, you know, well, I have a desk or something of his we can put in there, and thus we don't have to have the bad art that Chester Arthur represented in there. But at any rate, there's discussion of making it into a museum representing all of the presidents. So again, I encourage you. It was not hard for me to find these various reports and things on Google Books, searching for things like commission, East Wing, whatever I searched on this morning. You can find all of these. There's another one from the Department of the Interior, Comprehensive Design Plan and Final Environmental Impact Statement on the White House and President's Park, the land around the White House, from the Department of the Interior, the National Park Service. There are all of these reports and all of these commissions because there's a process involved for this, because that house is a historic landmark and it's ours. So when things happen to it, there's a regulated process involved. It doesn't belong to the president. It can't be haphazardly, dramatically ravaged as it has been without any approval, any oversight of any kind. The fact that that has just happened, going to come to that in a moment, means a lot. Now, there has been apparently, and I did not have time to look it up this morning, but I think that there are two private citizens, maybe from Virginia, who are suing, I think President Trump for doing this without getting permission. And what I could gather from this was that the suit argues that the administration began demolishing the East Wing without first submitting plans to the National Capital Planning Commission or consulting with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation or the DC State Historic Preservation Office. That's the process I'm talking about here. Those are all of the things you go through so that this is regulated, so that something, a symbol, a building that matters to everyone in some way or another isn't subject to the whim of a president who sweeps in and wants to make a monument to himself. That same complaint says that there was a failure to seek guidance from the Commission of Fine Arts, which traditionally reviews exterior changes to federal landmarks. Okay, so what we just saw this past week was just, excuse me, the demolition, the destruction of the East Wing of the White House. First, supposedly, it was only going to be the facade. And first, supposedly, you know, the East Wing, the president respected the East Wing. And then obviously, none of that really was true. And the whole thing was reduced to rubble over the course of the last week. I will readily admit here that I had and I'm having a very emotional response to that. And here's what I want to talk about. That what it represents, the fact that this is being destroyed, in part matters. As a historian, it is a historic landmark. It is part of our history. The East Wing, even if it's not the main sort of house part of the White House, and even if it's not the presidential sort of core of hub of things, the West Wing, it's part of the White House. It's ours. And to see it basically just smashed in like that, as an American and as a historian, that hurts. And I'm outraged at the disrespect shown for that landmark, for that house, for our history, and to us. Right. I am outraged. I've been very emotional about this. I have friends, you know, who are not and who said, well, the White House actually doesn't mean a lot to me as a structure. That's part of why I want to talk about what I'm going to talk about now. Why? So why does this matter? Right? Why does this matter? Why are people getting so emotional if you're not attuned to the history of it? If you're not really focused, if you think, oh, the East Wing is just the East Wing, it really doesn't matter. Okay. Number one, I'm going to repeat what the Commission on Presidential Office Space said in 1956. To many, the White House is a symbol of a free and democratic nation because it is accessible and open, as is the ideal of the democratic process. Its endurance for 200 years reflects the stability of our nation. So part of what I'm talking about here is it is a symbol, right? In the same way that the Capitol building is a symbol and is intended to be, and is covered in symbolism inside and outside of different things that represent the American nation and the democratic governance that underlies it. The White House is a symbol. It's not just the president's house. It's actually not the president's house. It's our house. And so as that kind of symbol, seeing it be ravaged in this way has a deep meaning, particularly now, at a time when norms and laws and rules, excuse me, and basic norms of humanity are being violated left and right. Seeing this hasty, reckless ravaging of part of the people's house is a visual metaphor for this political moment. It is crushing part of the people's house. It is spurning the history of that house, and in connection with it, the history of the nation attached to it. It is a physical, visible manifestation of the president's demands and whims being put above all else. If you asked me as a historian to create a let them eat cake moment, I might say constructing a golden ballroom at a moment when I believe today is the first day when federal employees are not getting a paycheck. This might be a moment that future historians will say, wow, look at that. People, benefits are going away. Healthcare is going to be unaffordable. People aren't getting paychecks. And I believe the spokesperson for the president said the president's main focus right now is the ballroom, the golden ballroom. So yeah, Marie Antoinette somewhere is smiling because this is another such moment in which people who are totally out of touch with the actual nation are following through on their whims. So for all of these reasons, crushing part of the people's house, spurning the history of the house and the nation, manifesting this president's demands and whims without any concern for anything else or any regulations or anything else, all of that matters. And the way that this was done, without any clearance, without any process, to me, is a monument to the destruction of checks and balances and America's democratic system of government. The rubble of the East Wing, to me, is a monument to the destruction of our system of checks and balances and America's democratic system of government. Not intended to be that. That's precisely what I think it is. It's a monument to this moment. It's a monument to what it represents. It's a monument to the values of this regime. And that's part of why it's resonating. It's resonating because it's a violation of our history, our nation, our landmarks, our history. But it's a kind of monument to that violation. And I honestly think I've been putting up images of that destruction again and again and again on social media, because to me, that shows precisely where we are. It's a monument to where we are. If you want to understand the current, how do I want to put this? I was going to say the current state of American democracy, look at the rubble of the East Wing. Now, I hesitated. I paused there because I am not saying that democracy is dead. I am not saying that our fight is over. I'm not. But what I am saying is we cannot pretend now that we have a normally functioning democratic government in place. And the East Wing is a monument to that fact as well. So for all of these reasons, I think this is part of why I've had an emotional response to this. It's part of why I think it matters tremendously. It's part of why it kept me awake the first night when it was very clear what was happening. It's part of why it matters. Not because it's more important than people not getting their paychecks or people not being able to have health care, but because it epitomizes, it is a monument to this moment of utter violation of democracy that we are living in and the ways in which this regime is dedicated to that. Okay, I'm a couple minutes early. I'm going to stop because I'm going to get myself all revved up here, and I would rather open things up and have a conversation. So, okay. Oh, mug, silly me. Okay, so I forget this like every time I do this 287 other times. I almost always, that's right. Someone says, too late, you are revved up. Yeah, it's true. I'm
Just
I,
a little, just a
a
little.
little, I honestly cannot express the degree of outrage I have about this. It was not a question I was going to talk about it. I'm beyond outraged for all of the reasons that I just discussed. But first the mug, then we can move on to outrage. So this mug was a gift mug, and as ever, I can't remember who gave it to me, so I apologize, and whoever is responsible must pipe up. Um, it's a mug of tribute to all kinds of presidential campaigns, and none of these presidents destroyed the White House. It's remarkable. They might have done renovations, they might have changed it in various ways. They didn't tear down a wing. So that is why I picked this mug. I looked for Truman because Truman did a substantial renovation. But again, he didn't just take a wrecking ball and knock it on down. But I don't think Truman is represented here. So for those of you who are new here, every week I have a mug that represents in some way what we're talking about. This one's pretty, sometimes people have to travel a far way with me to get to the link. This one, I don't think so. It's pretty clear. Okay. Now I will open chat and stop talking and we can actually have a conversation
I
about this.
feel like that mug was when we were at NCHE a couple of years ago. It was part of that weekend because I
Yeah,
recognize
it,
that
it,
mug.
it was. I think it was from when we did the live
Yep.
version of this at
Yep.
the meeting of the National Council for History Education.
All right, we've got tons of great questions. I'm going to start off with Kat Coyote. She says, I would love to, oh, nope, that's an after party question. Sorry, we're going to start with our good buddy Dave.
Okay.
He says, is it not more problematic that Trump has accepted and will continue to accept money for the East Wing demolition, turning it into a ballroom, essentially accepting bribes, than the reality of tearing down history to build a ballroom? Seems like another grift. It's important that they're modeling.
Yes, and that's a really good point, right? That friends and supporters, companies, I'm not going to name them, but you can find them really readily online, are coughing up money to do this. And yes, in a way, I mean, this is certainly not the first moment we've seen various corporations come forward and hand gifts to the president, like, look how much we love you, love us back. So yeah, that is an enormous part of the grift, the problem here. So I didn't mean to deny that that's something to be offended by. There are many things to be offended by, and that's a big one, is the way that this is getting done. At some point when I was researching this morning, I was looking up funding, right? Because most of the renovations in the past were done by appropriated funds, right? Not from private donors. So that whole sort of grifty odor to what's going on here is an extra added bonus of bad. It's a golden ballroom built in a sense on bribes. So yeah, that's offensive too.
Great. Thank you, Dave, as always. Linda, our good friend Linda in Florida, said that she read somewhere that going through the process, the approval process, would expose the bunker upgrade details to too many people, creating a security issue. I know there's this underground bunker somewhere. I always thought that was the Greenbrier out in West Virginia was where they had the underground bunker, but apparently there's an underground bunker in the White House.
There is an underground bunker under the East Wing, and supposedly, actually, let me get this, supposedly, because I have the name of the organization.
Mm.
Um,
She's got her receipts, people.
It is called the Presidential Emergency Operations Center. Um, and I don't know if I have the name of there's part of the military that will be overseeing changes to that bunker. So yes, so the East Wing was knocked down, and what this has to do with the bunker, I cannot tell you, but it is important to note that yes, there is a bunker underneath what was the East Wing. I believe that that's where the vice president was taken during on January 6th or September 11th. I can't even remember. At any rate, it's been used. So yes, there's a bunker, and apparently it's going to be updated, and various things are going to happen to the bunker. I can't tell you more about that because I didn't find more about that. So yeah, but that's going to go on too. What I wanted to respond to something that someone said here, and I might not be able to find it. Oh, right. Dave said, as bad as the demolition is, I'm disgusted by the 20 billion Trump sends to Argentina. So yeah, I just wanted to say, as I said during my comments, I'm not claiming that this is the worst thing happening right now, or even the most important thing happening right now. I'm pointing it out as a monument to where we are right now. It represents a lot of bad. It's a symbol of this administration and what it represents and what it's doing. So I totally agree. And I don't want even to suggest that the tearing down of this wing is the most important thing to think about right now. But I think for what it represents and what it shows and how it embodies this administration, I think, as I said, I think it's a monument to the heedlessness and the self-serving nature of this administration and to the savaging of our democratic process and the overriding of our checks and balances.
Yeah. All right. Our good buddy Daniel Abramovich says, do you think the East Wing destruction is intended to get a bigger reaction because the AI video where Trump defecates from a plane, I sweetened that up a little bit, on Americans didn't do the trick? I think it's deflecting the Epstein files again, but that's just
I mean, the deflections are deflecting the deflections at this point, right? I mean, the problem is what is actual badness versus a deflection from other badness, we can't tell at this point. In one way or another, I think flooding the zone so that no one thing can be focused on for too long, that's a tried and true and stated strategy. So certainly that's some of what's going on. Is this a specific way of drowning something else out? I couldn't tell you. It could be. I don't know. Something else will come along within the next week that'll, potentially drown this out. I don't know. But most of the things that are supposedly being drowned out, they're not. They're just not, right? Like we forgot the Epstein files. No, like we didn't. Like we're going to forget that AI video. No, or what it represents. Sorry, we won't. Like we're gonna forget that a huge chunk of the White House was knocked down. Nope, don't think we're gonna forget that either. So, they can keep trying, they will. But whatever is deflecting what, at this point, I can't tell you.
I imagine at some point in the future Joannes and future David Blights will teach a semester course on this term of what not to do. I mean, I think it will be, how many young scholars are going to be writing their first books on this time period in 20 years, 10 years, maybe?
Yeah, no, for sure. And the future historians, whoever they are and wherever they're from, who are writing about this moment, will have a far better understanding of what democracy is and what it isn't, and how fragile it is than we did going into this moment. So people writing about this in the future, if I were beaming in 50 years down the road and writing about this moment, that's probably how I would frame it, right? So now we have the moment when democracy was under attack. Let's look at how that played out. And again, the East Wing is a pretty obvious example of that, But yeah, that I think how not to do things and the deeper meaning of everything that's going on now and what it suggests about where we are as a nation. Yeah, I would say there are going to be a lot of books. Rosie agrees. I don't know if you can hear her.
Rosie's not having it.
Rosie,
Rosie is outraged.
Rosie is outraged too. She totally is.
If you're new, Rosie is a bird.
Rosie is Rosie the resistance
She's
bird.
our bird.
She's our bird, yes.
Okay. So we have the people's house, but we also have the people's bird.
Yeah.
Rosie. Okay. So Carol Hutchins asked, is it possible President Trump's administration underestimated the degree of anger and outrage at the East Wing destruction?
Is it possible? Yes. It is certainly possible. Do I think that they were worried about the amount of outrage? Probably not. I think, yes, they probably underestimated the response because President Trump himself at various points has said, first he said the East Wing is important, and then he migrated into, it's not that important anyway. Most of the original East Wing is gone. No. So he himself may or may not understand what the East Wing is. So yeah, they may have underestimated, but I don't actually think that consideration ever entered into their calculations. I don't think they thought, wow, what's the public going to think of this? I think they thought, or certainly some of them, we want a really big golden ballroom as a monument to President Trump. What do we have to do to get that? And I think that's the reasoning that went into this.
Thank you, Carol. Good question. Our good friend Ellen asks, Joanne, I heard you talking about the design of Washington, D.C. with the triangle created by the White House, Capitol, and Supreme Court, and what that represents. Could you elaborate a little on that?
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I've always found fascinating about Washington, D.C., right? Is that it was a capital for the nation that was constructed to be a capital. It wasn't just like we're going to take over New York or we're going to take over Philadelphia, which were the predecessors. So in doing that, they actually were trying, Benjamin Latrobe and others who were designing this, to embody in buildings the nature of the government itself. So for example, the Capitol and the White House are sort of opposed to each other, right? At the end of, I think it's Pennsylvania Avenue, to each other, right? Because they are, because look at this, checks and balances, different branches of government. Basically, the buildings and the layout and the road design of Washington was deliberately intended to be a physical manifestation of our system of government, of our structures of government, which I always find fascinating. Now, I've written about an early period, the beginning of my most recent book about Congress in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s. It opens, or part of the opening, talks about the early period when this was going on, when I can't even, I'm not going to remember the quote well enough, but it was like someone said something along the lines of, it's like there are these little enormous monument buildings surrounded by crushed brick grounds or something. It was like you went to Washington and it was like, oh, a cool building. Oh, a cool building. Nothing, so the construction process itself is fascinating. It's a fascinating thing, but the part that I love about it is that it was intended to be a physical street level manifestation of our government, of the separate branches, the fact that there were separate branches, that they had their own powers, that they checked and balanced each other out. So yeah, Washington is designed around the idea of checks and balances.
All right, Linda in Florida. We'll say that for the after party. Okay, Lee says, do you think the East Wing demo is going to swing fence sitters to get involved in protesting against tyranny? Will this kind of be the tipping point?
I don't know, because there are any number of other moments that could have been a tipping point. I don't know. In my rummaging around in government reports this morning, I saw various polls and other such things being taken, and some of them suggest that most people are not really thrilled with the knocking down of the East Wing, although more Republicans are happy with it than other folk. Will this be the tipping point? I don't know. I mean, I think it's such a visible manifestation of where we are. It could be. But at this point, I don't know what will be that tipping point. I don't know because how has that not happened yet? Right? To some degree, how have some of the other things we've seen not been a tipping point? Maybe this will be it because it's so visible. But I don't know. I mean, already, there are people I'm seeing out in the online world who are as outraged as I am. There are other people I'm seeing who are just really not as concerned. So if you're not concerned that a huge chunk of the White House has just been reduced to rubble without really any process involved at all, I don't know what the tipping point will be. The fact that it might not be a tipping point, that's pretty significant as well to where we are.
All right. Greta asks, do you think the complete destruction of the East Wing was payback for No King's Day?
Um, I it was it that explicitly, I don't know. What I do think is No King's Day was probably such a crushing blow to the ego of this president and to the narcissism of this president that yeah, he probably did something that felt like it's what he wants and he deserves it. And just even without No King's Day, I want a huge golden ballroom that's gonna like outweigh and it's gonna be bigger than everything else and it's gonna be me and it's gonna be mine and it's gonna show how wonderful I am. Is that in part a response to No King's Day? Well, the ballroom itself, I think, is very typical of President Trump's way of wanting to show himself as being the best, the most, the biggest, the most golden everything. But yeah, probably, I'm guessing, the manner of the way in which it was done, the just smashing in. Um, I think that the No Kings, I do think it, speaking generally, if you are a narcissist, having millions and millions and millions of people march on the idea that they hate you, I mean, even if you're not a narcissist, that would be really hard to take. If you are, then you're going to have all kinds of responses. And one of the ways, again, speaking generally, that narcissists respond to that is to lash out, right? How dare you? How dare you do something violent? So, I can't say with absolute certainty, but certainly it fits the pattern of what a narcissist might do who feels that they have been humiliated by the public.
It was interesting. Last week I was traveling, I did the show from Nebraska on Friday. So I was in Nebraska Thursday through Sunday, and then Iowa Sunday and Monday at two different teaching conferences. And I was really heartened to see in two, what most people think was very entrenched red states, they had large turnouts at their No Kings protests. And there were other communities in red states that had surprisingly large turnouts. So I'm hoping that this is a tipping point, that people have had enough. I don't want to get my hopes up too much for next week's election because I don't want to be disappointed like I was last November. But I'm cautiously optimistic.
Uh, yeah, I mean, you know, we don't we don't know. But I do think that someone just put it here too, that there's supposedly the three-fifths 3.5% rule. A certain number of people in the streets represents a significant enough number of people that there can be change. I do think, and this is despite the fact, and certainly it's not surprising that the events of No King's Day were, gasp, not really covered by the press. Shocking. I'm shocked. I'm sure we were all shocked. But the fact of the matter is, millions and millions of people took to the street. And I think on a local level, if you were in a red state or not, if on a local level you saw your locality with a lot of people protesting in a way that you don't normally see, that matters. It would matter. So, regardless of what the press has, or for the most part hasn't done regarding reporting the fact that millions of Americans, a huge, I mean, again, I don't know. And as I said when we talked about this, there are going to be all kinds of discussions about how many million, this many million, that many million. I don't know, and no one knows because some people signed up, but a lot of people did not sign up. I, personally, I don't think you should sign up to go. I think you should just go and protest. But regardless, we don't know how many people protested. But the fact that that happened, as with so many other massive millions of people protests that the press decided just not to cover, doesn't mean that it didn't matter. So is that a tipping point? I don't know. But in a way, the possible responses to that, including the AI video, including what's happening with the East Wing, those are ways of drumming home potentially the importance of what happened on No King's Day, right? If they are responses, if people see those things as responses to what happened on No King's Day, well, then that sure tells you, suggests to you that what happened that day mattered to him and mattered to many people. And I think it did. And I don't think that's just me being hopeful. I think, we already had this discussion. I think this was last week, right? That I talked about why protests matter. And part of the reason is because of the fuel that they provide. So I'm still, firmly in the camp that says that kind of action, it does not lead to immediate change. I would never argue that it would, but without that kind of action, good luck building a movement, good luck fueling change, good luck getting people up to come together and do something. It's an important part of setting the stage for action and change. I said this last week. I'm repeating myself, but I I firmly believe that to be true in the same way that I believe that what we just saw is a monument to this moment in this administration, the rubble of the East Wing.
Yeah. Okay. Our really, really good friend and recently retired favorite librarian in the whole wide world, Tim, who I think is a week into his retirement. Is that right,
Oh,
Tim? Officially? I think it's a week. Tim asks, how historically do other countries view the White House relative to the Capitol building or the Supreme Court building? He's curious if you know anything like that.
I don't formally know. I mean, I think people understand the White House as a sort of, symbolic building. I mean, not a palace, but a sort of non-monarchical, similar kind of structure that is a symbol of and a home for executive power in one way or another. In addition to having the city be of Washington be kind of a physical manifestation of our structures of government, the style of things that was created throughout this period, there was a very deliberate attempt for things to be plain and straightforward and not garish and not full of gold, for things to be in a small r Republican style, right? Meaning not monarchical, not aristocratic, not like what Americans at the time considered to be old world decadence. That what the United States was doing was a different kind of government, and the plain style was going to be what was adopted. I think like I think that might be explicitly what was asked for when they were designing chairs for the Senate. They wanted chairs done in a plain style. So the small r Republican style was supposed to be straightforward, not all ornamented, because it's representative of something that belongs to the people, right? It's not monarchical. It doesn't belong to a king, and it shouldn't suggest that it does. All of that is part of the design of the city of Washington and most of the things within it that date back to that time period.
Yeah. Tim also, part two of his question is, did New York or Philly actively lobby for their cities to be the formal center?
Well, there was certainly debate about it, and cities wanted to have that because it was going to mean that in one way or another they were going to get business and people, and that they were going to be made important. So one of the things that affected that debate at the time was how would the character of a particular city shape the government? Because again, the government was brand new. So there was discussion like, well, if the government, if the capital remains in New York, then New York's manners are going to, totally warp the government. Philadelphia was seen as someplace like in the middle. You have the Quakers there sort of weighing out, making things simpler and more plain than they might otherwise be. It's kind of happy middle ground. There was discussion in different cities as to how they would shape the character of the government. Again, the idea of having a city and of itself It's part of what happens in the room where it happens is this decision to move things south. Um, and that in and of itself was a concession. So I won't go into the details of the great dinner deal that resulted in where the capital, Washington, D.C. But yeah, Philadelphia and New York would have been happy to keep the government, to keep it there. But eventually the idea to move it south as a way to compensate the South for the fact that they would go along with Hamilton's plan to have the national government assume state debts. That's what happened in the room where it happened, and that's part of why the Capitol is located where it is.
All right. I don't usually pose questions, but I'm going to pose a question. I'm not even going to type it in. I'm just going to pop in here.
Okay.
Knowing that you and David and Bev are teaching this course, is what's happening. Like each day we're getting like slammed. Like, did this come up in your course this week? Or how are you guys? I mean, it just seems like so many things are happening so fast, and that's by design. They're trying to overwhelm us with one terrible thing after another. Maybe it's to take us away from Epstein, or maybe it's just. But how are you guys? Because high school teachers are struggling with this, and middle school teachers. How are you guys folding in what's happening in the now to this history course you're teaching on the American Revolution? I'm dying to know, and I think some other teachers in the chat need
Yeah.
help too.
I wasn't there this week. I was out sick this week, so I actually don't know how the lectures did or didn't reflect this particularly. I can speak for the 8 lectures I gave and the ways in which I was struggling with um, things that I was talking about, like, oh, I don't know, the Alien and Sedition Acts or various other things that were being reflected in the now. Um, I, you know, that course, there are 800 and whatever people taking the course. It's recorded and being put online. Will be thousands and thousands and thousands of people watching it. I think, and I think all three of us think that what it says um, will be all the stronger if it doesn't appear to be just grounded in this moment. So, for example, and you can go and watch this. All of my lectures now are online. My lecture on Andrew Jackson was about Andrew Jackson. But it was pretty clear as I was talking about Jackson that it reflected on the present in various ways. And I could hear people in the audience respond audibly when I said some things, or I showed a cartoon, a famous cartoon of Andrew Jackson, King Andrew, and which he's in royal robes. And I decoded the cartoon when I talked about it in class, that in the cartoon, Jackson is standing on a shredded copy of the Constitution, and there's a book on the ground, the laws of the judiciary of the United States, right? That it was very clear what people at the time thought Andrew Jackson was doing. Clearly, that resonates in a lot of ways with the current moment. Clearly, people got that message without my saying, da da da, da da da. So I think to me, and this is particularly true teaching the founding period, by definition, if you're teaching fundamental moments of American history that are talking about American values, American struggles, American conflicts, you will be weighing in on what's happening now. What's happening now is not apart from what has happened before. So I think all of us, and I even I will readily admit, we had a discussion in which, I asked, like, well, when I lecture about blah blah blah, how how free should I feel to just lecture in the way that I want? Like, should I even think about like holding anything back? And we all basically said, no, we should say what we want to say.
We can't
Um,
hold back right now. We
no,
just
well,
can't.
and no one is. So,
Yeah.
it would be interesting if you and again, you can go and watch the lectures and see. I think we're all saying what we want to say about the history of the past. I think it's really obvious the ways in which what we're talking about reflect and resonate with what's happening now. And whether we want that to be the case or not, that's the case. But you're right, it's tricky. I have always struggled with this, even in the past, like I didn't used to feel conflicted, like in my American Revolution course, when I would stand up and talk about a free press. Suddenly there was a moment where I felt emotional talking about a free press, and I would think like, wow, for the last 15 years I taught about a free press, I didn't feel emotional about it. And now I do. So yeah, the present can't help but shape what you're saying. But in a way, um, and it'll be interesting. I'll be interested to see what you folks think. But to me, what struck me, and I know that David and Bev saw the same thing, was the way in which I said nothing about the current day when I was lecturing about Jackson, but people took away a lot. And that, to me, that's more powerful than having me stand up there and hit people over the head with my opinions. My opinions in this moment don't matter as much as the actual history of the past and what actually happened and what it meant in the past and what it suggests.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question,
It
but
does. It does. And so I'm going to confess, I'm purposely waiting till you guys finish, and then my plan is to binge watch them over winter break
okay,
because
okay.
I really want to watch them all in order, and I want to watch them kind of at one time because I know I'm going to have lots of lesson ideas, and I'm going to.
Oh, that makes
That's
sense.
just how I do it because my teacher brain, and also just because I don't have the bandwidth right now, and I really want to absorb them and really have my full attention. So winter break is one of the only times of the year when I'm not writing new lessons. So of course I watch things to inspire new lessons because I'm a nerd.
And
Um,
oh no, and the lectures are being posted on a
right.
page that represents a
The
playlist of
playlist. Yep.
podcasts. There's every week there's a podcast. I
Yep.
missed the lectures this week and I missed the podcast this week, which I
Oh,
right kind of destroys me. If someone could find that link, the playlist for it, it's the
okay. That'd be great.
main lectures. So yeah. But I can't off the top of my head. Um,
Somebody will post it. I
yeah.
have it bookmarked. Ellen said she's a binge watcher too. Ellen, maybe we should have like a movie day together. You're not that far from me, I think. Aren't you in Virginia? I can't remember. Okay, we have time for maybe two more. I'm going to combine a Laura and a Jacqueline Houtman question.
Okay.
Laura was asking if you could speak a little bit about the modifications Truman did to the White House, and Jacqueline is concerned about the fate of the artwork and artifacts that were in the East Wing.
Right. I tried to find out about that this
Me
morning,
too.
and couldn't. I just didn't see mention of it. The fact that the for Fine Arts should have been consulted and wasn't consulted. I don't know. So I don't know what happened to that stuff. I don't know if it was removed. I don't know how it was removed. Oh, there, Tim just posted the playlist for the Devane lectures. At
Oh,
10.
good. And they say that the White House Historical Association said they removed the artifacts. So at least somebody that sort of knows how to preserve artifacts, it looks like was involved.
That's good because all I found this morning was a statement that it sounded like what it was saying was that like a visual record was made of everything that was there, which is great, but doesn't answer the question as to where it went. So I hope, uh, I beyond hope. The fact that we're asking this in and of itself says a lot. I don't know a lot about the Truman renovation. It was a big renovation. So when I initially began venting online about what was taking place, and I said something like, this is the worst destruction that happened to the White House since the British burned it to the ground in 1814, right? So last time it was an enemy that attacked it during wartime, but now not so much. And someone said, well, the Truman administration didn't attack it, but they had a lot of renovation. I don't have at my fingertips the nature of that renovation. It was extensive. It wasn't done with a wrecking ball over a weekend. So that's part of this is that the way in which what happened represents the whim of a pseudo king. That's part of what this moment represents. So it's not necessarily that renovation of any kind is bad. It's not that renovation hasn't happened before. It has. There have been all kinds of ways in which the White House has been changed, but there's a process that has to be followed because of the democracy, the democratic process, because it's the people's house and the people have a right to see what's happening and to weigh in because it's a national landmark and it's a national park site. And there are all kinds of ways in which it belongs to the nation. And so the nation should control what happens to it. So, it's I see all these things, destruction, demolition. Yeah, there are all kinds of words. I posted somewhere online um a list of all the words we could use, and renovation isn't one of them. At any rate, um,
Renovation is definitely not appropriate.
no, destruction, violation, demolition, or any number of other.
Yep. You listed some good ones last night. Okay, final word goes to Hamilton, as it should.
Okay.
Um, Tim wants to know, did Hamilton actively participate in the discussion on the future capital?
Oh, interesting. As to where it would be located? Well, I mean, he was in the room where it happened. He was at the dinner.
Right.
And he's certainly right. I want to be
Now
in.
it's stuck in my head. The
I
room.
know, I know. Well,
You're gonna make me sing, Joanne. I'm not a
I
singer
know.
like you.
I didn't call it the room where it happened before. I called it the dinner deal, which is, how historians referred to it. He was in the room, and so he certainly went along with this deal to move the capital south in exchange for having Southerners support his assumption plan. So in that sense, yeah, he was in that mix. I don't think he was involved in the ground level planning of what was going on, although I could be wrong about that, but I don't think he was. But as far as the location of the capital, then yeah, um, he was definitely involved in that. Yeah, Annie, you're right. Room where it happens is a lot catchier than the
Yeah.
dinner deal. The
Yeah, I
dinner.
just can't see that. Just can't. It doesn't rhyme with much, you
No,
know.
it doesn't. It
No,
doesn't.
Lin-Manuel knew what he was doing when he wrote that one.
He totally did.
All right. Well, we ended right on time. Good questions. We got a couple in the
Yes.
queue. I'm saving for the after party, but I think it's time.
I think, okay, so let me explain what's going to happen now. We are going to go to the after party. What that means is that we will no longer be recording so that we can be even freer and easier with our conversation than we were before, as though we were so restrained before, but still. If you beamed in through the National Council for History Education website, stay right where you are and poof, you will be in the after party. See, already there's a poof, two poofs waiting for me, three poofs waiting for me, four. Wow, you guys are like, you're quick. If you're watching us on Facebook, you need to leave Facebook and go to ncheteach.org/conversations. That's ncheteach.org/conversations. And then you too will be in the after party. I want to, as ever, thank you, Kat, for putting it out there, typing it out. I want to thank you all for being here week after week after week, 288 times. I want to thank you for engaging in the ongoing conversation of democracy here as a community. I want to thank NCHE and Jessica and Claire and Annie and John as well for making this possible week after week after week. And I just, we will be here next week talking about something else. I encourage you, no matter what the heck is going on in this coming week, to be sure to be aware of it and alert to it and to watch it. And I say this to my students when we have primary documents, like my Age of Hamilton and Jefferson class. It's all primary documents, and sometimes students feel like, how do they know how to decode those documents? And I say to them, pay attention to how they make you feel. If you read something and it makes you feel like this person must be upset or angry or happy, pay attention to how you feel in reading it, because that's evidence of some kind. So I repeat that here. As you're seeing whatever is going on, pay attention to your response, your internal response to what we're watching, because it matters. It matters because ultimately, all of this that we're watching, it belongs to us. And just like if we're outraged at what happened to the White House, it matters. And it matters, I think, for a lot of the reasons I talked about today. Pay attention not just to what's happening, but to how that feels and how it's weighing on you, because that matters. Our responses and the way in which what's happening is weighing on us is part of this moment. Okay, I will stop once again preaching. And we can go to the after party, and I will see you folks next week.